This is Cool Cat Teacher Talk, where we talk about what matters in the classroom. This is episode 12, part 1 of a 2-part series on writing.
Ever wondered how remarkable teaching happens? Find out right now at Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis. Get insights from top educators, tech tips, and inspiration to elevate your teaching.
Today's episode is sponsored by Book Creator. I'll share at the end of the show how I've used Book Creator to help improve student writing and literacy. To learn more, go to coolcatteacher.com/book creator. Today we're going to talk about writing, and this is one of my favorite subjects. In fact, my second book was Reinventing Writing, as we talk about teaching writing, but also incorporating all of those technology tools that can make writing so exciting. We also need to talk about some of the challenges of writing in the age of AI. But remember, I have a full show on artificial intelligence at coolcatteacher.com/talk AI. So in my book, Reinventing Writing, we talk about the collaborative writing Cloud 9. I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of these today in the show. We need to talk about change for a second because it took 70 years for the telephone to get to 50 million subscribers. Then we had radio. How long did radio take? It took 38 years to get to 50 million subscribers. Then we have television. How long did that take? That took 13 years to get to 50 million subscribers. Then we have the internet. How long did that take? It took just 4 years to get to 50 million subscribers. And now we have things basically go viral. Star Wars Angry Bird took 35 days to get to 50 million subscribers. How do we keep up with things in the face of such rapid change? Well, there's a method called Kaizen from the Japanese that is slow, steady learning. I call this innovate like a turtle, to take 2 times a week for 15 minutes to learn something new. Also, just have 3 things on your list of what you want to learn next. So as we go through today's show, I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. My goal for you at the end of today's show is to just pick 3 things to check out next. I'm sort of giving you a big, huge menu, but just like when you go into a restaurant and you can't eat everything on the menu in one sitting, you have to just choose an appetizer, maybe a soup and a main dish or a dessert, or maybe just one thing. Your list has to be short when you're trying new things, so don't get overwhelmed. So the first question is, why is writing still relevant in the age of AI? I mean, I've even had students ask this. Well, AI can write better than I can, so why should I even care about writing? Let's start with some examples just from the last few weeks of when I was using artificial intelligence. I do like to use Perplexity, and in this case, I was using Perplexity Pro. You get at least 3 of those queries a day, and I was working on my coding show. Well, when it helped me draft the script, it actually said that coding was more important than ever, with computing being the top source of wages in the U.S., and over 700,000 computing jobs available nationwide. I thought, wow, that's pretty impressive. However, when I clicked on the link, it took me to the Hour of Code Resources page, and there was nothing on that page that showed that 700,000 jobs were available due to coding. So if I had taken that and used it in my show, I would have had a problem. So I went and said back to Perplexity, you said that computers are the top source of wages in the U.S., but I don't see that information at the source you provided. And then Perplexity, it did the old apology. I apologize for the error in my previous statement. You're correct that the search results do not support the claim that computers are the top source of wages in the U.S. The information I gave earlier was inaccurate and not based on the given search results. Based on the search results provided, the highest paying in the jobs in the U.S. are primarily in the healthcare sector. Okay. And it goes on and tells how IT managers have a median average salary of $150,000 to $151,000, which is lower than the top paying medical professions that can earn $300,000 annually. So I'll tell you the truth about that. It really ticked me off. I was very close to taking that and using it in my script, but I thought back, what do I teach my students? Verify all your sources. And it was sort of surprising to me that coding was the highest paid profession. I just didn't believe it. So as I started checking that source, there was nothing to back it up. And I would have gone on and sound authoritative to you, my listeners, and you would have believed me and repeated it. That is why we have so much misinformation in the world today. AI says incorrect information in authoritative, convincing ways. People take it at face value and they start repeating it when it's not true at all, as well as the fact that we have a lot of posers out there who are just talking about things where they have no experience. That's why it's so important to stay in your wheelhouse. For me, as I put together this show, I like to lean on experts. And as I have my opinions, I filter them through and say, what does the preponderance of information say? And what do the experts say about this so that I can bring my own thinking in line with reality? So here's the problem. AI can just apologize, but this is your reputation. This is your life. This is your job. You are accountable for what you write, and I'm accountable for what I say on this show. I don't get to just say, oh, I'm sorry, and move on. It's kind of like the kid that picks on another child, and the teacher catches it, and they go, oh, just kidding. I always tell my students, I never let them have a get out of trouble free statement like, I'm joking. No, you weren't joking. You were being ugly. And you know what? AI is lying. When it lies to me, it ticks me off. It makes me angry. So we've got to understand that we have to verify everything. There's also this trouble of involuntary attributions. As I was researching this show, I came across something from Kristen B. Sandvik, written in November 22nd, 2024. And she said she was browsing an edited volume online and was interested in how the author had used her work. She saw a couple of recognizable references, but she was puzzled when she saw something that felt familiar, but that she couldn't specifically identify. So she went to the bibliography and found a fake journal article with a title that she would have used but had not, and it was published in a well-known and respected journal in her field, or it claimed to be, with the year, issue, volume number, and page range. And it showed up in the bibliography, and it was cited on Google Scholar. But you know what? It was not accurate. It was not true. And so we're starting to have all of this inaccurate information that's even being posted to people who are experts in a topic that they didn't write. So we've got to make sure that we start verifying that not only is that person a real person, but did they write it? Google Scholar is starting to get some error in it because of these fabricated resources, because people aren't checking things out before they publish. Now, there's also the proliferation of tools like Sourcely. Sourcely concerns me greatly. The webpage that I'm showing in the television version of this says, find academic sources in seconds. Save your sleep. And it says, paste your essay or paper to find, summarize, and add credible academic sources. That's something Google Scholar can't do. And then it claims like Johns Hopkins and MIT and Yale and all of these folks are using Sourcely. Okay, they might be, they might not be. It might just be that a student logged in with an ID from Yale, for all we know. So they say 10,000 students are saving hundreds of hours. Well, this sounds lovely, but you're just writing what you want to and then having it paste the sources in. The issue is we should do our research first before we have information pasted in to our topic. While we're doing research, maybe we can look at this, but We need to be looking at the research and forming our opinions, not forming our opinions and finding the research to back up what we say. Isn't that one of the big problems we have in our world today? So sourcely obviously concerns me greatly, and I believe if it's used in a paper, it should be disclosed. Now, there are other tools to help with research and citations. There's something called Cite, which SCITE, which has an assistant, and you can have settings to specify reference sources. Now, it doesn't let you upload full PDFs, so I don't think I would use that one. There's SciSpace, SCI space, and has a Copilot Chrome extension. That's a pretty cool tool. There's Elicit and Petal, PETAL, that lets you chat with all your PDFs. And then there's a tool called Consensus, which is an academic search engine. Research is going to change a lot, and it needs to. But built into all of this artificial intelligence research, we've got to start having the veracity of the articles that we're using verified. Just because it's on the web doesn't mean it's accurate. So I've been teaching since the 90s, and I've said that a million times, and I don't know why we're still saying that. And just because AI says it definitely doesn't mean it's accurate. But there are tools out there that we're trying. So reason number one, writing is still important, is that AI writes incorrect information. Now, I want to be clear, AI does not hallucinate. Hallucinate is a word for a living being. AI is not living. It's built of algorithms and bits and bytes and predictive tools and a big, huge database of information behind it that's trained it, but it doesn't hallucinate. AI fabricates. If it's not well trained, it fabricates. And even if it is well trained, it fabricates. And the problem is it sounds really intelligent. Sometimes the biggest mistakes happen with folks who sound really smart, but don't know what they're talking about, using all those big words. And that's what artificial intelligence does. So when we approach AI, we need to have a huge skepticism. We also need to have personal knowledge in a domain to properly supervise and use artificial intelligence. And if you're going to use artificial intelligence, like I do sometimes, you've got to be willing to verify every single source. If you get all these sources and say, hey, I don't have time to verify it, then you shouldn't use it at all. Writing is a process where we are saying something and we need to be able to back up what we say because truth matters. Now let's talk about the second reason writing is important. For my newsletter this week, I drafted in longhand a piece I wanted to write about how important teaching is. For the TV version, you can see a page from my journal that I wrote in longhand. Well, then I turned it around and dictated it into Google Docs because my iPhone, which does do text recognition, it does not do very well with cursive, unfortunately. So I wasn't able to just take a picture and copy the text off of my longhand written page. I could have if I printed, but I couldn't do it. So I dictated it into Google Docs, and I have this big, huge, one massive paragraph that I dictated from my journal. Well, then I pasted it into ChatGPT to help me clean it up. And I want to specifically hone in on one or two lines in what I pasted in. One of the things I said was sometimes when I see children 20 years later, they are unrecognizable to me, but they always recognize me and tell me stories they remember of this or that we discussed or what I taught them. I also used another turn of phrase, and it said, we're constantly fast-forwarding the movie in our mind, recognizing that every challenge, whether it's a math problem or a social conflict problem, is a learning opportunity, so future problems can be solved before they even arise. Now, in that specific paragraph, I was doing a play on the word problem, because in schools, we use the term math problem all the time. But I don't understand why we consider problems a bad thing in every other class. We should have a lot of problems, and we should be solving those problems. Problems are not bad things. They're teaching opportunities, and we need to look at it differently. So I felt like those two different phrases were kind of important. Well, in the reworked piece where I had it add some emojis and that sort of thing, it said, years later, former students may be unrecognizable, but they remember us. Okay, I totally felt like that lost the meaning of what I was trying to say. I was trying to say that I might not recognize them, but they typically do recognize me. So I kind of just felt like it lost some of the meaning. And you might say, Vicki, that says the same thing. To me, it doesn't, because it lost what I wanted to say. The second thing is, it said, we are time travelers, fast forwarding the movie in our minds. A math problem, a social conflict, or a small triumph today can transform into life skills tomorrow. Well, maybe that was what I was saying, but I lost what I was trying to do, the play on words about problem, because I often, like I said, talk about that problems are not necessarily bad things, and that they're part of teaching is helping kids learn to solve problems so they can solve it in their future. So the reason, too, why writing is still important for us to do is that AI can actually lose meaning, and I believe it can significantly weaken our writing. A lot of the most original things that I write in my pieces, AI just pulls out. That's because it's trying to predict what the average everyday human would say next. So when it comes across something that's truly original, it has no way to process that. So it's just going to kind of leave it out. I think that's a problem. We're basically pulling the creativity out of our pieces. So we have to be really careful when we use artificial intelligence, because of how it can make writing be more average and can weaken it in many ways. So let's talk about another thing. In that piece that it sort of helped me tweak, it said, other careers focus on the present, but as teachers, we're architects of the future. And I thought, okay, that's lovely, but that sounds like something somebody would have said. So I go on a quest to look, and I went into Perplexity, and I said, who said that teachers are architects of the future? And it said the phrase teachers are architects of the future is often attributed to various educators and thinkers. And then it said something about the Greek writer Nikos Kazantzakis, and that he highlighted the sentiment. But when I looked at that original piece, he said nothing about teachers being an architect. He might have expressed the sentiment of how important teachers are, but he did not state that. And then it goes on and talks about Alexander the Great, talks about the importance of teaching. Okay, that's lovely, but I wanted to know who said teachers are architects of the future. So then I go to Google and I put in quotes, teachers are architects of the future. And this is why we still need our Google skills. It gave me an AI overview that really meant nothing. And then I started to see that pretty recently on social media, a lot of people are starting to say that teachers are architects of the future. I wanted to look at everything prior to when ChatGPT came out. And I'm not saying that all the people who said teachers are architects of the future used AI, but let's just say it's possible. Okay. So then I started looking at things on Google and started going through this searching process of things that were earlier. Now, I saw that Feza Schools, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. If not, I apologize, said something on World Teachers Day on October 5th, 2018, teachers are architects of the future. But then I went back and I started looking in other places. Was there actually a person who said it? Well, there was an event in June. It looked like it was in India, and that was in 2021, where teachers are architects of the future. Now, I did see it in 100 positive affirmations for special education teachers, but that was from 2024, and we all know that people are using AI to write that. So when I go through the affirmations, I really could see teachers are architects of the future, and it was put in quotes, but nobody was cited. Okay. So a lot of times when you see 100 quotes of this or 100 quotes of that, those are just AI generated, and they'll even quote it and they won't have a source, which is just really annoying. So then I found this one from 2021, which was an online presentation that happened. And several sources quoted this, and it said Dr. R.A. Mashkalar, who was former Director General of the CSIR, said, "Teachers are architects of the future of the country. To remain relevant, you have to learn, unlearn, and relearn throughout your work life." So he actually said teachers are architects of the future of the country. He was a person that said this in multiple places. I found it in several articles. So even though there was a school that said teachers are architects of the future, it said it in 2018, actually a person saying it happened in 2021. Now, I've looked everywhere to try to find who said this particular thing, but it looks like the person I found is Dr. R.A. Mashkalar, and that's probably who should be cited, if anybody, and there probably even needs to be some more research. So reason number 3, why writing is still important, is that AI can and is harming human attribution and recognition. One person posted on Quora, they thought AI had stolen their personal works. And remember, when you post it in artificial intelligence, it's using that to train the data. So having private AI tools is really important for companies and for others for that specific reason. But I also came across in August 7th of 2023, Jane Friedman wrote about how there were 2 books posted on Amazon claimed to have been written by her. And basically, someone took all of her stuff and trained AI and had AI write the books in her voice and posted them on Amazon. Amazon did not immediately take down those 2 books. Amazon actually took it a couple of days, but she was a pretty popular author on publishing. So eventually they did take the books down, and they do have AI policies that you can't submit work written by AI. Of course, I've seen a major educational speaker claim to have written a book in 2 weeks using artificial intelligence. So I'm not entirely sure that that's being followed, to tell the truth, but AI is harming human attribution and recognition. So we need to be really, really careful that we are writing and that we are respecting the humans behind the writing. So when we write, we are accountable for everything we write, that it is accurate, properly cited, representative of our knowledge at the time, that it follows the academic standards of our organization, and it's written by us. Now, it really irritates me. A couple weeks ago, I was pulling something out. I had done a podcast on 5 ways to give a genuine compliment, and I wanted to quote it in the gratitude show I did here on Cool Cat Teacher Talk that you can find at coolcatteacher.com/talk gratitude. And when I searched it, I actually got a generative search result at the top that gave the 5 points that I made in my video and on my blog post. And it just showed the YouTube video to the right. So it basically regurgitated all that I had done and put it at the top of Google search. I don't get any views for that on YouTube, and I get no traffic for that on my website. And in fact, I have seen a significant change in the traffic on my website. So we need to know that writing is important, but when we read things, we need to just, I think, ignore that generative box at the top of Google. First of all, I don't think it's very useful. Second, you can't cite it because it's going to generate differently based on each person's search. And third, let's respect the authors who are taking the time to create the content and actually read their words, because I've already talked about how AI can make things a little less powerful or less impactful. So when we write, we do have accountability for what we write. And as we're moving through this process, I think a lot of it is that us as academics start respecting what people write. So I'm going to pull a few things now from my book, Reinventing Writing. John Seeley Brown said, "You can't just drop new innovations into a classroom and hope the instructor will invent effective ways to use them. To fully utilize a new teaching technology, you often need to invent new teaching practices as well." Collaborative writing is a very important feature of what we can do now. When we have papers, or we're working on accreditation, or we're writing a strategic plan, much of that is done collaboratively. So students need to be able to write as individuals, but they also need to be able to write collaboratively. And there's a lot of research behind this, that it fosters community, it helps see problems from multiple viewpoints, that co-authoring impacts the writing of individual authors, it improves learning experiences, and that it's essential in today's workplace to be able to collaborate globally. And so collaborative writing is something that I've taught quite a bit in my own classroom, as well as individual writing. So when you select technology tools to use in your classroom for writing, I have my 20 questions that I always like to ask. Now, this graphic will be included with the show, coolcatteacher.com/talk writing, but includes things like, can students have a distinct username? Does it track profile data on the students? Can you set it up without an email address? Or can I access the site getting through my school's filter? Does it meet my school policy requirements? And then other things that have to do with, is it easy to scale? Is it easy to manage and monitor? What are the interactive features? Does it let me embed audio and video? And can I upload or edit simultaneously? Does it build a good community and have good help files? And finally, how private is the data on the platform? So I want to talk a moment about a form of writing in the classroom, note-taking. I have a meme that says, and then the teacher said you may take notes, and everybody's taking a picture of the screen. The problem is students can't find those notes. When they put them in pictures, they can't find them later at all. So there's a system for taking notes that I like to follow by Tiago Forte called Building a Second Brain. So we want our students to know how to build their electronic brain or their electronic notes. And Forte uses a method he calls PARA. He organizes it by projects, areas, resources, and archive. Mine is a little different. I use Evernote and I do projects, areas of work, topics of interest, and history. So mine stands for PATH. I just liked that a little bit better. And I have a system for organizing all of my notes. But the big thing about his method is that you're putting the notes where you need to find them for that next task. So the moment a student has a research project, they go ahead and make a folder for it, whether it's in Google Drive or Evernote or wherever they're taking their notes. And that's immediately where all that content goes for that research. So the moment they sit down to write, whether they have a snippet of an idea or something they dictated on their phone, it's all in one place and they're ready to go and they don't have to find things. The first step of writing should not be looking to find everything. We should be filing it as we go where we need the task to happen. For example, in my 80 Days of AI in HI stands for Human Intelligence, I took those articles that I wrote about and then I filed them under artificial intelligence, which is a topic of interest, after I moved it out of my project for 80 Days of AI. So you're always moving things to where you're going to use them next. One of my former students, Miller Singleton, was profiled in 2015 on the University of Georgia website as one of their top students. And she was one of my amazing students I've taught over the years. And when she won this award, I was talking to her and she said, Miss Vicki, the best thing you ever taught me was OneNote and how to take notes, because I had PowerPoint slides that would be 250 slides for a class. And I was able to take those slides, pull them into OneNote and take notes alongside them. So the best thing you ever taught me was how to use a notebook. Well, that was maybe 1 or 2 days of what I taught her, but she said it was the best thing. And so the question for my students is, can you find your notes after you take them? Do you have a note-taking system? Now, when we look at notes, we want to be able to do several things. Students should be able to record audio and record video as they are typing. It's preferable if they can handwrite into their notebook service. Evernote, which is what I use. I can handwrite on paper, take a picture, and upload it into Evernote. But you can even handwrite on a touch screen into OneNote, which is really the tool I kind of recommend for students. Do you know how to transcribe that audio and video? In Evernote, I just touch the audio and it immediately transcribes it. But this feature is built into a lot of notebook services. Do I know how to import presentation files? Can I collaboratively take notes? Can I find notes at my point of need? And do I know how to share notes? When my students do research projects, I require that they have a tool that they use to take notes. And they actually have to submit their multiple pages that they have for that research project. So some of the most popular digital notebook services today, you've got Evernote, OneNote, Notion, Google Keep. You've also got some digital note-taking tools like Kindle Scribe, Remarkable, Rocketbook Fusion, Moleskine Pen Plus. There's also some really cool free open source tools, Logseq, which is spelled Logseq, and something called Obsidian. And of course, you can always have a paper method. The one thing about paper, though, is when I take it and I scan it, so all these things I write on paper, I always take a picture of and pull it into Evernote, because Evernote can search by handwriting, and it's actually pretty good at reading cursive. So if I type something into Evernote that I'm searching for, it will pull up a handwritten note for me that I have written, and then I'm able to use that in a current project. I've been using Evernote for well over 10 years now, and so the longer I use it, the more useful it is, although I have tested all these other tools as well. I've often read that math and science in particular, you should not take notes with a laptop. And this is an older article from 2014. It said, a learning secret, don't take notes with a laptop. Well, that was before touch screens, but the subtitle really tells us what we need to know. Students who used longhand remembered more and had a deeper understanding of the material. Very often when people take notes by typing, we transcribe, we don't process, particularly if you're somebody like me. My mom was a keyboarding teacher, so I type around 120 or 130 words a minute. So when I am just typing every single word the person says, I'm not processing about what's most important. When I've taken classes on note-taking or sketchnoting, I've learned that numbering and bullets and symbols and drawing, these are all things that aid with recall. So the note-taking process is very important. And I have found that teachers that have a system for note-taking and teach it to students give them choices for how to organize things. The most powerful note-taking tool that I had in college was the Cornell Note System. And I learned that from an old book called Blue Chip Graduate, and it really helped me be successful in college. So this note-taking method, as we talk about writing, is so very important. You can snap pictures and scan things, but all of our cameras on our phones now are really scanners. So one of the ways that I use my voice now is that you can dictate into voice memo on your iPhone and then click the three dots and click copy transcript. Then you can go into your notebook service and you can paste that in. So voice memos have become a massive way that I do my first draft, and my students are starting to do this too. Learn how to use the tools in your smartphone or your tablet device. Every single device now will let you dictate into it. You will have to turn the microphone on to dictate, however. But it is a really useful thing that students do need to know. So I recommend that schools select an official notebook service that they connect students and teachers. Teachers can even give handouts in OneNote, which is very powerful, that you learn how to share notes and how to capture, annotate, and find, and then see if students can find those notes at a later date. You can have a whole new open note approach, not open book, but open note approach of have they captured the things that you have said and done. But some teachers don't want to let kids record. I just want to remind all of us that dysgraphia means that you struggle to handwrite and can't really read the handwriting. Some students have never been taught how to type. and they're very slow at typing. So if you let them record and they can transcribe and then they can do something with those notes, that can be so helpful to our students. So I hope that you'll have an open mind about letting students record. Here's another question I get asked. Is there an easier way to research term papers and research papers? And do students really need to print out all those pages? So Reinventing Notecards was a chapter of my book of Reinventing Writing, and we talked about social bookmarking. Now, social bookmarking doesn't mean what it used to. One of the most popular social bookmarking tools used to be something called Delicious. Don't look for it. It's not there anymore. But, people share links on Pinterest and Reddit and Flipboard. Those are popular sites, but I wouldn't really call them true social bookmarking. A lot of people collect research in Pocket, Read Later, and then Digo is still out there and a fantastic tool for true digital note cards. But you can also use your digital notebook for this. So just as I learned to take notes with index cards, do we have a system that we can take notes using all of these digital tools? Now, this is something that I go well into in my workshops and sessions with teachers, and I'm not going to go into it now on the show, but just know that there is a deep rabbit hole for doing this research. So the question that I always ask is, do you have a method for digital research and collecting the notes to use? And are you encouraging kids to not only collect all that research on the web, but also all AI-generated content? They should have a link to it, and they should also paste in the content with sources, because as we've discovered, sometimes those sources are not accurate, and this is your reputation on the line. So having that original copy of the page is very, very important. Some people make mistakes, and then they remove it off the web, and then you're left hanging. So having that backup information is just so important. When you have a note card, you obviously have the person who took the note, you have the title of the source, you have a summary, and where it came from. So whatever tool you use, and in the video I'm demonstrating from Digo, is you still want to have the title, you want to have the hyperlink. You can also add tags so that you can find it later, and even Google Keep will let you do this. But then you need to have a description in your own words. So the one thing I teach my students is, I want you to go through the web and find these sources of information, but you have got to put it in your own words at the moment you read it. Because if you can teach students to process and write in their own words at that phase of research, they're far less likely to plagiarize. The problem is if they just quote directly, unless it's like a direct quote that you really need to do. But even with a direct quote, I would still write something about why I think that quote is important in my own words. The reason students plagiarize is that they directly quote in their research, and then they don't want to go back and reprocess and reread that to be able to put it in their own words. So it's a flaw in the research, I find, not a flaw in the writing process. So have students learn how to create appropriate digital note cards in the tool of your choice. And every tool is different. This year, when I did my Web 3 presentation project, I actually taught multiple notebooks. I gave them the option of Notion, OneNote, Evernote, Google Keep. And then they experimented, and many of them found something they really liked that they also use in their other classes. One of the advantages of Digo, which is still a very powerful tool, is that you can make lists, you can annotate websites, which I like that when we're doing website projects. I can make little Post-it notes that I can share with my students, and you can generate reports off of their research. So Digo remains one of the most powerful social bookmarking tool out there in the sense of true social bookmarking. Although a lot of those features have moved into either, like I said, the Pinterest type approach where you're just sharing it with everybody, or into notebooks where you're collecting that research for some future project. So now I want to mention how I've used social bookmarking in a tool called Notion. The screen that I'm showing for those watching on YouTube is a Web 3 wiki. This was done in my AP Computer Science class, and my students were researching Web 3 technologies like self-driving cars, hyperloops, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and Internet of Things. And they were doing bookmarks. And Notion will let you bookmark and share things and then write together. In my opinion, Notion is the replacement for what we used to use with wiki spaces. That tool went away after Tez bought it and then they got rid of it. So Notion is really the best for wikis unless you install a full media wiki on your server. So here's my recommendation. Teach students to use the digital note cards in the tool of your choice. Teach them a method of tagging and note organization for easy retrieval later. That includes summarizing in their own words what they've just read and why it's important. Test a variety of services during your turtle time, your innovation time, to find out what works for you so that you can model something for them. Have a system of organizing research before graduating high school. And when you have a research project, go ahead and name that project, put it in your notebook, and make a file folder in whatever cloud service you use. And have students turn in links to their digital research when they're doing writing projects. The research should include links to all AI-generated content if you allow it. If you're allowing the use of AI should be cited so that you can review that and ensure that students are putting things in their own words and that they're verifying their sources of information. If I see that they're getting it from AI, you better believe I'm going to drill down and have a couple of examples to show to my students as a class that this information might not be the best to use, because we are teaching these literacy skills for surviving and thriving in the AI age. Another thing we're reinventing is our filing cabinet, and that is our cloud services. Some of the most popular tools are Dropbox, Google Drive, and OneDrive. But let me warn you, don't put your Dropbox inside your OneDrive or vice versa. That is just a terrible idea. And when I see it happen, computers are just so slow. Now, Google Drive used to give you a folder on your desktop that it synced with Google Drive. It doesn't anymore. You literally have to have it up in the cloud. But if you're on a Chromebook, you're going to be in the cloud anyway. I do think it's great to pick a cloud service. And for me, it's Dropbox. The computer I'm using now, my personal Mac, actually syncs with my Mac at school and syncs with my phones. And so any device I get on, I can access my own content using my cloud service. That filing cabinet is available to me everywhere. So knowing how to use our filing cabinet is really important in the digital age. So some of the things kids need to know about cloud syncing is, how do I save to the cloud? And how do I get my files? And how do I move my files? These are all things they need to know. Now, you can move files between services. If you're in one, you're not stuck forever. Mover.io used to be my favorite, but it looks like it just moves into Office 365 now. Google Takeout lets you take out your Google files, and this is something that graduating seniors need to do. And there's other tools like CloudFuse and other things that can let you easily move files from one place to another. But make that decision, put them one place, and help your students make that decision as well. And I teach students when they're writing things like their resume, that needs to be in their personal Google Drive or on their personal device. Because if they have it in their school and their account goes away 6 months after they graduate, then they can no longer access those files. I also want to point out that students do need a place to share video. And that's beyond the scope of talking about writing, but it is important. So let's talk a moment about reinventing essays. Some people are moving back to completely handwritten essays, and there's nothing wrong with doing that as long as you understand that those kids who have dysgraphia and cannot recognize their handwriting, or they have written expression issues, you are limiting them. I'm a big advocate for allowing kids to draft in a way that works for them, as long as drafting doesn't include having AI write it for them. That's, of course, the issue, and why so many people want to handwrite things. So as I'm recording this, there have been some changes to one of my favorite collaborative writing tools, Google Docs. Just as Sheets and spreadsheets have tabs, now Google Docs has tabs. As I'm working on this show, I made one tab for research, one tab for episodes that might work as part of this larger content, and another tab for the script for the show. So collaborative documents are changing, and their features even being added to Microsoft Word. I do want to make a point. Microsoft Word is a great tool, but there is a difference between Word Online and the desktop version of Microsoft Word. Now, it does allow simultaneous editing, but when students use the online features, sometimes it doesn't have some of the tools they need to write their essays. So some of the favorites are Google Drive, OneDrive, which is Office 365, and there's even things like Dropbox Paper, but there are so many places you can write. I write my books in Scrivener and I publish them in Vellum. There's so many places to write. Although with students, pretty much Microsoft Word and Google Drive are the basics. Now, I want my students to know both. I advocate for what I call being platform agnostic, which means it has nothing to do with religion there. What it means is that any platform that is thrown at my students, I want them to understand and be able to use it. I want them to be relevant. That's why at our school, we have Macs, we have PCs, we're bring your own device. Some kids have iPads. I know that can be more complex, but it's really the way the world works, and I want my kids to be able to go from one type of technology to another. So I want my students to be able to collaborate and write together, how to comment and do peer review, how to make suggestions in a Google Doc versus changing things, the etiquette around it, how to export, import, upload things to it, how to open it on multiple platforms, and how to share it. There are a lot of tools out there I do recommend. I like the Hemingway app for bringing that grade level down and making writing simpler. I also like Grammarly with the AI generative features turned off if your school has that available. ProWritingAid is another incredible tool that you can use for free for 500 words or less that will check style and grammar and so many other things. Another thing I teach my students is to remove sticky sentences, particularly when they're doing their book writing projects, because a sticky sentence is when you use glue words or the most commonly used words in the English language, and it slows down reading. So you want to remove those sticky sentences. And so ProWritingAid helps you do that very easily. The other thing is I want to teach my students to add 30% transition words, and ProWritingAid helps that as well. That's actually based on Google's algorithms. They prefer web pages with about 30% transitions because it makes it easier to read. Now, I want my students to be able to draft in a way that's comfortable for them. So can they use their voice and dictate into the phone, which now has built-in transcription, as I already demonstrated earlier in the show? They can transcribe inside their notebook or use transcription apps. Or can they handwrite and know how to turn that into typed text? I'll never forget, I had a student who used to hate to write, and I taught her Google voice typing, and this has been quite some time ago when it first came out. She dictated her whole work in just about 10 minutes. She literally looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Miss Vicki, you have changed my life. I can write now." Now, some of you say, well, she used her voice. That's not writing. No. She used her voice and turned it into text. That was her first draft. Then she had to edit and revise and proofread and change things around and all that we do to produce a final written work. The goal is that the final work will be written. But for me, I want them to be able to draft in a way that they're comfortable with. One note about Google voice typing is traditionally in the past, it worked best in Google Chrome. I have seen people try to use this in other web browsers, but if you're using Google tools, download and use Google Chrome instead of tools like Safari. I've recently had Safari literally break Google Classroom and freeze and not work for kids. So just know that Google deeply tests with Google Chrome, and that's preferred web browser when they're doing Google voice typing or anything else. We need to remember, though, when we're given feedback, that if we do all of our feedback in handwriting, and oh my goodness, please get rid of the red pen that stresses kids out. We've purchased iPads for our writing teachers so that they can write on the papers in Google Docs. It makes a PDF. When I started using my iPad to grade writing assignments, it was a game changer for me, and it saved so much time. But even then, I typically will write in a green or a purple pen. I don't write in red pens. I do prefer giving feedback in voice or video wherever possible. So remember, if they're weak in writing, they may be weak in reading. And then voice and video can give you faster and better feedback for students. The other thing I teach my students is to take the rubric, take their paper, and to paste it into AI and say, I need feedback on this paper. This is the rubric. Do not rewrite my paper for me. I want you to give me bulleted items of points that I may lose on this paper for purposes of revision. So I give them the prompts they need to turn AI into a feedback tool. And these AI tools are going to be built in for feedback for us to give to students. And remember, if you're using these feedback tools to help in evaluating students, all the things I've already said are true. Sometimes the true original beauty of their writing is obscured by artificial intelligence, and truly unique writing will have a problem being recognized for the beauty that it is. So you have to still read those papers by your students, even if you're using some sort of AI like Grammarly to find all the mistakes. Also remember, AI checkers don't work. For more on that, go to coolcatteacher.com/talk AI, where we discuss that extensively. There are some tools like Mote and Read and Write for Google Chrome, and you can also record those videos, put them in your Google Drive, or use Screencastify to video their document and record your verbal opinion about different places as you mark on the screen. So there's lots of ways to give voice and verbal feedback. And I think that's really better than a lot of written feedback because like I said, if they're weak in writing, they're probably going to be weak in reading too. And you can hear your voice and your body language when you have just audio, or when you have audio and video, then they can actually see you. One last thing is we want our students to be able to convert from one format to another. So inside Google, you can go to File and Download, and you can download it in Word, open document format, rich text format, PDFs, plain text, EPUB. And I want to point out that EPUB is actually the publishing format used by a lot of the electronic publishers. And then there's something also that if you have time to go into with kids called Markdown. And it's just a fast way of formatting that a lot of us use for our web pages and our books as we write them. So here's some of my recommendations. Set up some collaborative writing tools. Make sure that teachers know how to give text and voice feedback. Empower peer feedback and teach students how to give each other good feedback on these systems. Train and connect everybody, and then teach everyone how to convert file types of all types. So we don't have time to get to all of the different things that I share in my book, Reinventing Writing. I talk about graphic organizers and pre-writing and the importance of brainstorming. I talk about cartooning and blogging, a lot of other things in my collaborative writing Cloud 9. And if I was writing that book again, I'd also have a big, massive chapter on artificial intelligence. But don't worry, I'm sharing it all on my blog and sharing it here. So now let's look at some great ways to get feedback. Thank you for listening to today's episode, which is really meant to be a background episode for building the basis for writing. So you can select the tools and put the fundamentals there. Now, the next episode, I'm so excited to say, we will interview an educator who had over a 30 percentage point jump to a 92% pass rate in her ELA classroom at a low-income school. She's a remarkable educator. The other thing we'll have is my coworker, Dawn, and how she has adjusted in the age of AI. She's had a lot of traditional writing training, but she sat down with me for a special interview to kind of share how she does it, as well as we talk about rigor in writing and giving feedback. Now, I'd like to give a word to all of you who have a time of looking for gifts for your children. My encouragement is to nourish their interest. Many years ago, when I was a little girl, I loved to record on my tape recorder. And I realized that when I talk about cassette tapes, I am dating myself, but that is okay. I created a little radio show before I was 10, and I called it Recording Vicki. And I went around at Thanksgiving and at Christmas in the very house I live in now and interviewed my grandfather, grandmother, my siblings. The only thing I regret is that I didn't have enough cassette tapes, and I taped over a lot of those interviews, which I really wish I had now. But I probably recorded for at least 500 hours, if not more, just as a little girl as I was recording. The other things that I asked for, erector sets, technology things, chemistry sets, and books. I didn't ask for what the typical things that many girls my age asked for back in those days because I loved technology. And I'm thankful for parents that nourished my interest. The big encouragement is to nourish interests in creation. Look at what kids want to create. There's a big difference between playing a video game and streaming a video game and creating a video around it. There's a difference between watching YouTube and making YouTube videos. So encourage the creation capabilities of your children because that may actually be something they do in the future that hasn't been invented yet. When I was doing Recording Vicki on my cassette player, I had no idea I'd be looking at my Elgato Stream Deck and my teleprompter and looking at you and talking to you across the country on radio, TV, YouTube, and podcast. I had no idea about that. And you really have no idea what your children will be doing either. So look at those interests and encourage those interests as you select things to give your children throughout the year. As always, thank you for listening. And as I'm approaching the end of season 1 of Cool Cat Teacher Talk, I hope you're finding that these episodes and interviews give you a broad brush look at particular topics as you work to improve your classroom and reach all of those students. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the show, for liking it, for sharing it, and telling others about Cool Cat Teacher Talk. One of my all-time favorite tools for teaching writing and creating is Book Creator. Your students of all ages can make books that will come alive with text, audio, images that they create and design with a direct link to their Canva account. I have seen my own students blossom when they write their own ebooks. I hope you'll go to coolcatteacher.com/book creator. And use the coupon code CoolCatTeacher to get 3 months free of the premium plan. You can learn how Book Creator can improve literacy in your classroom. Their free account is full of options to help your students write their own books, and their premium account is a powerhouse of learning literacy tools. Use the code CoolCatTeacher and get 3 months of premium Book Creator today. Book Creator remains one of my longest used and favorite tools for teaching writing. So try it out today. Thank you, Book Creator, for sponsoring this show. Thanks for tuning in and listening to what matters in the classroom. This is Cool Cat Teacher Talk.